Right Side Nation, what's up? It's Mike Hanley. It is July 9th. It's 11:59 p.m. on the West Coast Pacific time here. I'm out in Southern California, so it's almost the 7th of June. So I just wanted to start this off. I mean, I just got off work. I'm a little wound up, but I'm just getting energy from our president. What our president is doing. I mean, this guy, you just can't teach this stuff. I mean, this is just in Trump's bones. What he has going on right now is something else. I'm going to go over to the G7 summit a little bit here and talk a little bit about trade. I just watched a little video on Trump's press conference after the G summit in, I believe, Charlevoix, Canada, and just kind of just go over a few things. But I mean, just the idea. This guy's up in Canada. He just does the G7 summit. We got Merkel there. We got Trudeau there. We got the guy from France, I believe Macron. And we got these different prime ministers. Trump's sitting down with them, and he's leaving, and he's going to Singapore. He's going to Singapore for negotiations of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula to meet with Kim Jong Un of North Korea. So I mean, just this idea that he sits down, boom, he's done, and I'm going off to Singapore. I mean, the energy. I mean, this is dragon energy, folks. I mean, this stuff is top notch, top of the line energy. Unlike, I think, any other president in the history of the United States, I don't think anybody's quite like this guy. Um, the just the idea, the mindset, and the absolute willpower and energy just to continue to fight for what he believes is the right thing to do. So whether or not you agree with him, I mean, come on, let's commend the guy on fighting for our country, both on a defensive front and an economic front. But I kind of want to go over a little bit the whole idea of Trump's message during the summit is that the United States has been taken advantage of on trade, and we've been taken advantage of financially, and that's billions of dollars of trade deficit that we have with some of these countries, and we have $100 million trade deficit with Mexico, and that's just one example, and that's NAFTA. What we're looking for, or what Trump is looking for, is he's looking for reciprocal trade. I mean, the idea that um, if there are certain barriers that one country has on us, then we will have the same barriers set forth on trade with them. So that's reciprocal trade. And ideally, we want to have no tariffs, no subsidies from governments subsidizing certain markets, so it's a level playing field. And that right there is free trade. Uh, Another thing that they talked about at the G7 summit, which wasn't, on the economic front, it was on uncontrolled migration. Uncontrolled migration, I think this has to do with the great Muslim migration. Some say that these people coming in from some of these different countries, mostly Muslim countries, that they were refugees, refugees of the Syrian war. And if I have to be completely honest, I think that's a bunch of bullshit. I think it's hogwash. I mean, I think this was a designed migration of Muslims into Europe. I don't think there's any question about that now. I know many people will disagree with me. Of course, there were some refugees. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we have some refugees that were leaving Syria. They were going into Europe to get away from the war. But I think for the most part, it was a migration on purpose of Muslims into Europe. And I think part of this has to do with, um, the Islamic Caliphate, the idea that essentially Islam wants to take control and conquer Western nations. Now, I'm not saying all. Muslims want to do that, but I'm saying the objective of many Islamicists um, is to destroy Western civilization and implement Sharia law. And so I think that was, what Trump was talking about. He's talking about uncontrolled migration where people are leaving countries and going into other countries, as we saw in Germany. I mean, Germany's been taken over by migrants. France has no-go zones. I mean, I saw a video one time. Now, I can't say 110% if it was from France, but these no-go zones, they're not a happy place, my friends. I mean, these places are pretty darn nasty. And I'm not talking about in terms of the people, I'm just talking about the conditions in which these people are living. So I just want to make that clear. So Trump's at G7 and he's going to North Korea, was going to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong Un on the denuclearization of their Korean peninsula. And Trump was saying that Kim Jong Un has a great opportunity for his people, his nation, and for peace. And I think all the countries across the world want that. We want peace. We don't want fighting. And we want, hopefully, everybody to live a absolutely happy life. So, hopefully Trump can go there and get a deal. And there's some more things I'm going to talk about, but I just have some notes here that I'm going over. Another thing was that Trump wanted Putin into the summit, which would make it the G8. Previously, it was the G8 summit. There are some things where Russia, I guess, wasn't cooperating with the summit and some of the countries in the summit, so they went ahead and removed Russia from the summit. So I think in terms of world peace, Trump would like to see Putin there. He would like to see Russia represented so that he can go ahead and continue to work with Putin, continue to establish a relationship with Russia, and just continue to move forward on that front. We've had for a long time a lot of, how do I put this? We've just had a lot of back and forth with Russia. Whether it was the Cold War, and then people talking about, oh, are we going to get in war with Russia? Trump's going to, send nukes to Russia and all this different stuff that's being said in the media, which is absolutely insane. I think Trump wants, to see more of Putin. And I think he wants to make a deal and have an understanding and come to an agreement just as normal people do. I think a lot of this in the media is blown up, but I think when two people sit down at a table and they have an understanding of what needs to be done in a way that is, for the most part, honest and upfront. I mean, not on all fronts, but for the most part, I mean, they can make a deal and hopefully come to some type of agreement where we have peace. But anyhow, so Trump wants to see Russia at the G7, which would make it the G8. Just going back to tariffs. So one of the main things that was brought up in terms of trade was the idea of having no tariffs at all. So that's no barriers, no tariffs, and no subsidies. So if we're talking about completely fair trade, I mean, if we're talking about free trade in the purest of ideas, that means that people, being in the United States where I am, I can manufacture or produce goods and sell them to another country, but without um, any type of trade barriers in the way. And then people in Canada would do the exact same thing. So it's the idea that that is completely free trade. You don't have free trade necessarily when you have a bunch of tariffs and subsidies involved in trade, because that's not necessarily free. If I want to send something to another country on a good or a product that I've produced, and they are taxing me with a tariff, essentially is what a tariff is. It's a tax to bring product into another country. That's not free trade. Free trade is when I send a product to another country and there's no tariff, there's no subsidy, and there's no barriers, and then they buy it at the price. And then that price, assuming it is competitive in the economic structure of that country, will then benefit those people because it's creating competition, not only within companies in the United States that are trying to sell products into Canada, and I'm using Canada as an example, but also it will also create competition for companies in Canada to raise their level and their quality of the goods that they're providing, and provide it at either a better quality or perhaps a better price. So these are just basic things that we're talking about in terms of the economy with um, goods and services that are provided by companies. Um, so that's just the idea, basically. That's essentially what free trade and Larry Kudlow, the economic Trump's economic advisor for the United States, took a moment and kind of spoke about a barrier-free trade agreement, and that barrier-free trade agreement would essentially be a truly free trade between nations. Um, and one thing that Trump talked about, he was talking about an imbalance. So he's saying that, the tariffs that Canada has on our goods are up here. And then we have, you know, if we're going to try to get a little bit more to even this out in terms of either selling more or raising our tariffs or them lowering theirs. So there has to be some type of even keel line where it all balances out and they come together. And so the idea is that the United States really, we can't lose any more than we already have. I mean, we are so far behind these countries in terms of the trade balance that we can't lose anymore. So the only thing that would happen is if they don't accept Trump's agreement, which is to give us a little bit more, to slowly give us more and more over time so that it all balances out. If they don't agree to do that, then essentially we're just not going to trade with these countries. We'll just accept goods from some other countries, and we'll find a way to get goods and services that we need at a price that is helpful to our country. I mean, it's that plain and simple. So the idea is, hey, let's balance things out. You're here, we're here. Let's kind of bring it here, and then slowly over time we'll get it together and we'll be on a level playing field. I mean, it's pretty simple. So the idea is, and what Trump is saying is, don't raise your tariffs any more than you already have, because if you do, we're just not going to accept any of your goods. And I don't think anybody wants that. Some people will call that a trade war. Well, I think if you really look at what we have going on, we're already in a trade war. We're getting crushed. We're getting absolutely demolished, and Trump's coming in, bam, doing what he has to do for the good old US of A. So he's representing the people, and I think in a very good light, not only on the economic front, but on the national, on the international stage with peace. Um, and also, he was asked about NAFTA in terms of the trade deals with Canada and Mexico. And one of Trump's major things was that NAFTA may be renegotiated, or what we might have to do is go ahead and do two separate deals, one with Mexico and one with Canada. And instead of a bilateral deal, we have a unilateral, so we're just United States with Canada, and then the United States with Mexico. So then we have agreements with one off on each country. It's far more clear and concise, and there's far less confusion in terms of the expectations of what these deals mean. And also, instead of convoluting things and making it more gray and saying, oh, well, we're getting this with Mexico. Well, what about Canada? Can they get this so then we can all get it together? And I mean, come on. It's confusing. So why don't we just create a deal with the United States and Mexico and the United States and Canada? And then that way, bam, the deal's hashed out. We don't have to worry about any, well, they're getting this, they're getting that. Because, of course, no one's going to be happy in the deal. But when you bring in a third party, it's going to confuse things a little bit. So if we're just going plain and simple, straight down the line, start checking off, to me, that just makes more sense. There was a question from a reporter at the G Summit, and this was the highlight, folks. I mean, this was absolutely pure gold. It was golden. I tell you what, it just doesn't get any better. I mean, my eyes are watering because I'm almost laughing right now. I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, this is great stuff. So there's a reporter who hops on and he says, you know, there's a report that countries were angry with you and that you were angry with these countries, and because of that, you're leaving the G7 summit early to go to Singapore. And then Trump sits there and he says, "Oh, and who are you with? Who are you with?" And the guy's like, "Oh, I'm CNN." And then Trump just goes, I mean, this, you could, I mean, I heard the question and I knew right away. I'm like, that just sounds like CNN speak. That sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, let me tell you, that was absolutely priceless. And he goes, "Go ahead, tell your fake friends at CNN." He goes, "All is good." He goes, "Of course, you know, it's not all hunky dory all the time." I mean, that's the gist of what he said. We're not always going to be best pals with every single person in every single country and every single turn. I mean, what is this, some socialist utopia? I mean, let's be real here, folks. Let's get it together. And that's the one thing Trump is. He's as real as it gets. He says what he means and he means what he says, and he comes in, pop, and he hits them straight in the mouth, and they just don't know what to do. So, I just kind of wanted to drop this video. It's something that I thought was really important. The G7 summit, Trump's off to North Korea to negotiate that denuclearization, hopefully, of the Korean Peninsula, looking for peace in North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and of course, peace with China. So, hats off to Right Side Nation, to all the patriots out there. Hey, let's make America great again. This is Mike Hanley with Right Side News. You're on the right side.